Okay, so straight off the bat, this is not going to be a good video. If you're expecting high quality content, I'm afraid you're going to have to look elsewhere. But if you want some random ramblings or musings to the background of someone making a mediocre pair of earrings, then you've come to the right place. I didn't even want to make an earring, to be honest. I wanted to make a video, a semi-edited, passable video to post on YouTube. It's been something I thought I should do for honestly a decade, and I've told myself I wasn't doing it as I was waiting for the right idea or the right time, thinking that somehow when this time came I would suddenly be able to conjure up beautiful imagery and evoke emotion with impassioned storytelling. But that's not really how these things happen. To become skilled at something, you have to fail. You have to falter and you have to embarrass yourself. You have to keep producing trash after trash after trash till one day you may or may not produce something worthwhile. Of course, you can avoid all of this through simply never trying. If you never try, you can never fail. If you never try, you can keep the notion that you would have ultimately been successful if you had. This is a real fear of mine. A lot of people will have a fear of failure, but me, I have a fear of failing to ever even try. Lord alive, deep-rooted fears less than a minute in. Let's talk about the earrings, Luke. Get back to the earrings. So I've made similar earrings to this a couple of times before. I gathered the bark that it's made from on a walk with some friends a year ago or so. It was an overcast, moody kind of day. The clouds had rolled in and we decided to scrap our ascent of the mountain in Ben Louis in Scotland, and instead opted to pootle around in the forest nearby. During our wanderings we'd come across a fallen tree in a glade, with its root structure somehow still intact, albeit with the roots now stretching out hopelessly into thin air rather than burrowing down into the earth. Surrounding the tree was a carpet of bark scraps, each made to shimmer in the dappled light by the heavy damp hanging in the air. We gathered as much of it as we could stuff into pockets, and since then we have been trying to come up with new and interesting things to make from it as gifts and the like. I've often felt in life I wasn't really that creative a person. My sister was always very artsy, and I think in part that made it easy for me to typecast myself into being the computer nerdy one. It's funny even thinking back on it now, because I remember being really into drawing and making music here and there, but those memories become almost obscured as they don't really match up with the idea I have of myself. I think as children we put our imaginations to use, conjuring new worlds and envisaging other dimensions. But as adults our imaginations come up with new lies to help make the world fit to our expectations. That sounded darker than I meant it to. I think it's just good to be aware of how much our brain can spin a yarn, for good and for bad. There's a admittedly silly phrase I've been using to sum up this idea. Don't drink your own Kool-Aid. It just reminds me to not always believe the story that you're telling yourself. And if you think you're not telling yourself a story, then your glass is already half empty, my friend. Or half full, if you're that way inclined. It does feel marginally ironic to be talking of how to avoid narcissistic tendencies while simultaneously recording a monologue to be posted online. This is a delicate game I often find myself playing, finding how to feed the ego just enough to keep it motivated and enthused to try new things without embarrassment, whilst also not allowing myself to slip into being a self-obsessed arsehole. It's not a game I always win. It's funny with these things though, as most people have a natural tendency away from the optimum in one direction. Some people will be too confident, some not enough. I feel a lot of my life up to this point has been finding which direction I have to push myself in different areas. I have a tendency not to work enough, so I know I need to push myself away from that. But I also know that once I start something, I have a tendency to be a little overly ambitious with how it's going to turn out. So again, I have to steer myself against that. What this means though is that it's really difficult to give or receive advice unless both parties understand which direction the advice has to be navigating towards. We will almost always only give advice that we think would help ourselves, not the actual advice that the person needs to hear. The advice I really need to hear is how does anyone make this part of the earring neat at all? I'm at the stage where you need to bend the metal to attach the earring to the hoop that goes through your ear. This is obviously a pretty important part of the earring, but one I've never even come close to doing well. Each time I go through this process though, I learn more and more about how the person who cares most about the imperfections is the person who created those imperfections. Everyone else will be far more preoccupied with the perceived imperfections in their own life. This is true of a crooked earring hoop, but also of that terrible joke you made at the family reunion 4 years ago. For every social blunder you have etched into your memory, there were 10 more by people around you that breezed right through your mind without a second thought. Fortunately or unfortunately, most people are the protagonist of their own story. For me, this has actually been a really comforting revelation, and for my own protection, I will believe in its absolute truth despite irritating evidence to the contrary. Sometimes you gotta keep alive little falsehoods to keep the wheels in motion. And while some gears remain in motion, others grind to a stop. and that is my ability to write rambling nonsense. Turns out there is a limit to how long I can monologue about nothing in particular. Well done for lasting this long. I almost didn't. If anyone has any questions about the earrings, just ask below. Any questions about my life philosophies, you can keep those to yourself, or ask literally anyone else who'll probably have a far more insightful answer. So yep, that's it. Bye.